When you reflect back on your burnout experience and episode, what did you sacrifice or neglect most that you think contributed to that burnout episode?
I think it was the balance. Like, work just became everything, and it was all consuming, and I didn't allow anything else. So we need to operate in different states. There's a time for us to be professional and to do our work, but we also need to play, have fun, be in nature. If that's what you choose to do, spend time with friends and family, all the things that make you personally happy, that needs to be an important part of your life. And if you spend too long in one state or one state of being, it doesn't allow your whole self to come out and you isolate yourself.
Welcome back to the Charlène Giselle Show. I am delighted to welcome Deidre Bowen today, the Director of National Programs at Mental Health UK. With over 15 years in the third sector and a former career in law, just like me, Deidre is here to share how her work is addressing some of the most pressing mental health challenges we face today. In this episode, we are going to dive deep into burnout, the signs, the symptoms, the solutions, our personal journeys with burnout and our combat against burnout, how we can overcome mental health hurdles, and whether you're dealing with work stress, looking to support your loved ones or your colleagues, seeking strategy to improve your overall well-being and continue to perform at work. Today's episode is packed with actionable insights tailored to help you face and conquer your mental health challenges. Deidre, welcome to the Charlène Giselle Show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlène. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. I first came across your work when I was reading the Burnout report that came out in January this year. And I have to say, it doesn't sound so good when we look at this report, Deidre, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, no, there's the report was an interesting journey for us. And I think it highlights the prevalence of burnout in the workplace and really underscores the need for us to take action. And for me, I think there were 3 stats in that report that really tell a story. If you don't mind me sharing that,
Please.
Those 3 stats. Okay, so 9 in 10 adults in the UK experienced high or extreme stress in the last year. Couple that with 20% of adults having to take time off work due to their mental health caused by workplace stress. And the last thing is that 49% of adults say their employer doesn't have a plan in place to spot the signs of chronic stress and prevent burnout. So it's easy to see when you link those 3 things together that we're not addressing burnout or supporting people to stop them from getting to that point of extreme or chronic stress. And what was interesting, what came out as well, is that younger employees, and what I mean by that is 18 to 34-year-olds, they're more likely to take time off work due to stress. They're also more likely to talk to their employers or line managers and engage in those conversations. And I think there's something we need to learn in that, because I think where we're really missing as organisations, which can give you a competitive advantage, is kind of thinking about how do we work with a multi-generational workforce, and how do we support people at different, from millennials to Gen Zs, and how do we put that place of support? And everyone is unique and different, but what can we learn from that? And then I think the 2 other things that came out for me in that burnout report was the impact on productivity and performance. So it not only finds that it affects, it's not just about the individual, it has an organizational productivity effect. So if you're suffering from burnout or stress, or you're on the verge of, or you've got some symptoms of, you're going to be less engaged, you're going to be less productive, you're more likely to take sick leave, leading to higher turnover rates. So when an employee feels supported and trusted and has that overall job satisfaction, their productivity soars and you have a workforce that's mentally healthy. And I think the other thing that I'd highlight would be the really crucial role of line managers and senior leaders within the organisation. So for me, line managers need to be trained to support their team's well-being, have those supportive conversations about reasonable adjustments if they want, and know what the rules are, understand the organisational policies, and encourage people and encourage individuals that they employ to take early action, or themselves taking early action to prevent someone from burning out. And senior leaders play a crucial role as well, by them sometimes prioritising their mental health when they need to, taking work breaks if they're in an office, deliberately taking that break from their space to maybe take a walk outside or eat in the kitchen, wherever it may be, setting those boundaries. I think that really sets an example to employees. And the last thing I'd say is that lots of organisations either go for one or the other, either the individual approach or the organisational approach. And I think we need to look at it not more holistically. We need to look at workplace culture. Policies are important, but we also need to tailor things for individuals as well, such as wellbeing packages that can be put in place to really seamlessly link and to try and address burnout and stresses in the workplace.
And I love your point about the fact that it needs to be addressed at the organizational level and the individual level. And in my experience, having been a burnout consultant for many years across global organization, I often find that if one of the two is missing, then the result is not going to be as impactful or as long lasting, right? There may be this one initiative and then it will fall flat eventually unless there is a maintenance program and the level of support and also a cultural shift within the organization. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about what you've seen work at organizations in terms of initiatives that are a positive way forward and what perhaps you have seen not be so effective?
Yeah, happy to. So I think each organisation needs to do things that are individual for them, and I think that's really important that you tailor it to what your organisation can manage and so on and so forth. But some of the things is, that line manager training I think is crucial. I think putting in place wellbeing support packages, things like that. But it has to be more than tokenistic. So not just a yoga session every Wednesday that people can go to and can access. I'm not saying that's not important, but it needs to you need to understand your workforce and what they require and have different packages. It can be as simple as just giving people the autonomy to take breaks when they need to. Trust in people can be really important. And I think having a varied package available is really important. I think it starts from the top as well. So organisationally having a strategy in place, and not a strategy that sits on a shelf, but one that comes to life and is actively looked at by senior management and is then communicated and articulated to teams so they understand what the organisation is doing, what they're doing, what the plan is, and how we're going to keep employees mentally well. Regular check-ins with staff. I think I've definitely seen examples where employees are seen to be doing well. So on the surface, people are good at masking. We're all good at masking, and you think they're okay. But sometimes it's if you're having one-to-ones with your staff, just checking on workload challenges, particularly for those people that maybe don't want to say that they're struggling because they're worried about, we glorify overworking, working hard, working all those hours. How are they really doing? And are they getting the support that they really need to achieve? And just checking on workloads. We like to develop people. We really like to challenge people. But is what we're asking reasonable and achievable? Or is someone just saying that because they're worried that they can't do that? I think as well, fostering a culture of care and collaboration. I think that for me is key. So avoiding stigmatizing language, and around mental health and mental illness, and having those really open conversations with people, and senior leaders visibly talking about how they maintain their mental health, or if they themselves have struggled in the past, sharing that with people and having that culture where it's okay to not be okay, and we will give you the support that you need to thrive in the workplace. I think those are some of the key things that I think are really, really important.
I'm really glad that you've mentioned that, and also to walk the talk in terms of if we have leaders or managers listening right now, because very often I get this one example that comes most often is, well, I don't take any breaks for my lunch because I have no time. And it seems so small, right? We're talking about very small behavior change, but very often when I work with overwhelmed, burned out, exhausted employees, that's one thing that comes up very quickly in the conversation. I never have 5 minutes to eat. And actually, it cascades into a whole lot of negative results: poor digestion, high stress, increased risk of snacking, that can lead to energy dysregulation. And when I say, I understand that you're so busy and you're eating at your desk and at your laptop, can you tell me a little bit whether you feel culturally that it would be okay not to? Often I get, well, no, because my boss also eats at his or her computer. And so if I don't see my boss take a lunch break, how can I take a lunch break, right?
And completely.
That is such an important conversation to be had in terms of the role that we have as leaders, as managers, to actually walk the talk so that our employees, our staff, do what we do and mirror good, healthy behavior. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Charlène. I mean, I've learned the hard way, actually. So in a previous role, I had a line manager, and I was dedicated to my work. So I thought I needed to work, above and beyond. And that for me at that time meant working outside of work hours. So I'd be sending emails at 8:00 at night, 9:00 at night. And my line manager said to me, "What do you think that's saying to your team? What message are you sending to your team there? What you're saying to your team is, I expect that," or potentially saying to your team, "I'm expecting that of you." And that wasn't at all what I was expecting, but it's about modeling that behavior. So if, it's important that you are as what you really live, what you expect of your team, you live that yourself, and you implement that yourself. And that may mean visibly taking time away from your desk, taking breaks. And I think for me, also modeling, what really big thing I've learned is modeling vulnerability, which really plays a key role here. So sometimes when you get it wrong, or you realize that you need a break from work, articulating that to your team. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign that you failed. It's just about looking after yourself, and also being clear. This is something I've learned over time, and everyone will have them. What are your non-negotiables? So for me, one of my things is, in order for me to maintain my work-life balance and for work to not seep into my my life outside of work, I go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. That's really important for my well-being, and I know that it is. So talking to individuals about what's important to them, and it will be different for everyone, but really modeling that behavior. And I think it's so important as senior leaders that we also have those open conversations when appropriate to, and support people as much as we can.
One advice I love to give when speaking to line managers and leaders is, we often have a lot of work KPIs, obviously, to manage an organization. But what about having a dialogue around health KPIs? What are health KPIs for your team? What is, exactly as you said, is going to vary for everybody. For one of us, it might be going to the gym. For somebody else, it may be spending time with their children, or having a day away from the laptop, a weekend, on a non-working day, doing a bit of digital detox. What is that one thing that you are going to do this week to look after your mental well-being, social well-being, emotional well-being, and also to understand that well-being lives in an ecosystem, right? It's hard to be thriving intellectually if emotionally we are not well. I think this notion or idea that emotions don't come to the workplace, it's not only false, but it's a complete illusion where our psychological well-being has a huge influence on our ability to perform. So I think that's actually a conversation that has a real place in the workplace.
Definitely. And I think for me, there was a pivotal moment that I would call where I changed, that shaped my approach to performance and well-being in the workplace. And happy to share is that I remember during the height of the pandemic, I was in a previous role of the CEO of a charity. And as a lot of us it was a really difficult time. And I just remember after the Christmas break, we were having team meetings online. And the hour-long meeting was quite an emotional one, with team members in tears and speaking about how they found it difficult to disconnect from work because their work was their home as well. They were in their home and the pressure of that. And just by putting well-being at the forefront, nothing complicated, but just shifting that focus and putting that front and center and introducing some additional measures. And as you're saying, having those conversations with people and saying what's important to you to look after yourself, what's individually important to you. It paid dividends. Like the performance and the results of the team drastically improved. They were visibly happier and motivated, and giving people the autonomy and trust to look after themselves as they knew better. They know best how to look after themselves. Had such an impact, and definitely got a lot of feedback that the team felt supported, valued, and cared about. And that, for me, is the sign of a really healthy culturally healthy workforce.
Absolutely. And I was wondering if the work that you do now and all your passion for this work to combat burnout has something to do with the fact that you navigated a burnout episode as well.
Yeah, so I experienced burnout in my previous role as a CEO, and it's interesting actually, because if someone was to ask me at the time, when did it start, I wouldn't be able to tell you. It was quite a slow and incremental build up. I do remember my thought process becoming chaotic and unstructured. I often became distracted. So I remember at one point I had this really important report to write, and I thought, I just need to focus and give this my full attention. And then an email pinged through. I felt this urgency that I needed to read it. What did it say? Did I need to answer it immediately? My phone would ring, this impulse to check and so on. So I'd lost the ability to really focus. And I think it felt like, for me, I've become detached from my emotions as well. I was constantly living in this state of overwhelm. And I remember my partner would obviously want me to be present at weekends. I'd be there physically, but not emotionally. I'd be checking emails, or I'd be trying to focus, I'd be too focused on work. And some of the, I love two of the loves in my life of food and the gym, as I said. And I was just going through the motions. Food was tasting bland, and and physically I was jittery. I just had this. I had headaches. I'd be able to fall asleep really quickly, but then I'd wake up with thoughts consuming about what I needed to do the next day. And I think when I reflect back over that period, I realized that I couldn't recall the last time that I'd belly laughed. I couldn't remember feeling happy, just this kind of numbness. So I first started voicing that I was burnt out. It was around Christmas time. So it probably started around, I don't know, May of that year. And it was around Christmas. It was quite a while incrementally building up. And I was in an online board meeting, and we were talking about the year, the various successes and challenges, and the impact that the year had had on me. And everyone was really lovely. They listened, they validated my feelings, how I'd felt. But I needed more than that. And there's an important lesson to learn there. I would have really appreciated some more curiosity and questions, and encouraging me to open up further, because a couple of people had got in contact with me after. A couple of the board members said, you seem different. You didn't seem your sort of smiley, happy self. And I think it's important when you see that in someone that you delve underneath and really find out what's going on. And it was shortly after that it was the Christmas break, and I realised that I wasn't well, and I took 3 weeks off work. And interestingly, I expected to wake up the day after I took my time off work. I expected to wake up and be like, yeah, I'm alive, I feel great. And I felt exactly the same, physically, mentally and emotionally exhausted. And it took a while. It took a long time to get till I started to see joy in it. Took little things that I saw joy in, and I slowly began to open up to people, that my partner and close friends and family. Because before I would say things like, when someone approached me and noticed a difference, I'm okay, it is what it is, and I'd just brush it off. So I had some therapy, and I put some boundaries in place that were really important to me. And I think, having experienced it myself, I just realised how harmful it can be to your well-being, and why we really need to take concrete actions to prevent it from happening as much as we can.
I'm so grateful that you have the courage to share your experience. I know it's a vulnerable place to be, and I really want to honor that, because I know how devastating burnout can be. We can learn a lot and grow from it, but it can be very taboo still, I believe, and isolating and embarrassing, because we are so dedicated to our profession and so motivated. And it's a big part of our identity as well, being able to do well, especially when we're perfectionists. And I believe that you are a perfectionist too.
I am a perfectionist. Yeah.
How much do you think that played into the burnout equation?
I think it did play a part. I've got to take, I always want to do my best and for everything to be perfect as I see it. And that means that you can sometimes spend too long on the little details, and you don't let things go, and you are constantly, there's always room for improvement in things. There's always a way you could, but is this good enough, or am I happy with this? I'd always be striving for that bit more. So I'm definitely a perfectionist, and it's something that I have to keep in check, because my natural tendency is to overanalyze, overthink, which can be a strength sometimes, that my analytical ability, but sometimes it can veer into where I just need to stop. I've done enough, or it's good enough. And I definitely think that play, and that perfectionism it's not just in terms of your work itself for me, but I used to wear as a badge of honor the fact I hadn't taken any sick days. I'd keep it to myself, but I'd be really proud of myself that I hadn't taken any sick days for 5 years, and so on and so forth. When I really should have done. If you're ill, you're ill. You can't work at the best of your ability. But that perfectionism in me, that need to just appear like I am invincible, was something I've really had to work hard on. And I think what I've learned from that, and definitely from my burnout experience as well, is that I don't know it all. And that's fine. And I don't need to know it all. And actually, I openly display vulnerability. That's I think now, one of my strongest traits I have as a leader, is being able to display that vulnerability, and knowing who I am and my tendencies. I can keep myself in check, I think.
And now, when you reflect back on your burnout experience and episode, what did you sacrifice or neglect most that you think contributed to that burnout episode?
What did I neglect most? That's a good question. I think it's that balance. I think it was the balance. Like, work just became everything. And it was all consuming, and I didn't allow anything else. So we need to operate in different states. There's a time for us to be professional and to do our work, but we also need to play, have fun, be in nature, if that's what you choose to do, spend time with friends and family, all the things that make you personally happy. that needs to be an important part of your life. And if you spend too long in one state or one state of being or one way of being, it doesn't allow your whole self to come out and you isolate yourself, you know? So yeah, I'd say that was the key. And if I may, Charlène, I'd say the other thing was just that isolation and not letting people in really had a major impact for me. And one of the things that I've been fortunate to have, and I really strongly believe in it throughout my career, is my champions. So in every job in life, I've had people that have got my back and they tell me the truth. And this is friends, family, colleagues, even if I don't want to hear it. And those are the people that will advocate for you, even when you're not in the room. And they're really important. And I remember, I can remember my really significant champions over the years. And one for me was someone who can sometimes struggle with confidence. I was doing my A-levels, going back a long while now. My A-level teacher, history teacher, was like, I think you should apply to Oxford. And I was like, no, I definitely won't. I'm not good enough for that. I definitely won't get in. And she really helped me to see things differently and worked with me to build my confidence and really believed in me. She was like, I know you can do this. Let me support you to get there. And I did. I applied. And truly I did that because of her support and her trust and her belief in me. It made me believe in myself. And I got in. And I just think that it's so important that we have our champions and role models and we incorporate bits of other people. We see someone doing something really well and I think, oh, I really like the way you did that. I'm going to incorporate that into my leadership style. So yeah, those are the things that I really treasure and are important to me as part of for my work life, but also my personal life as well.
I love this role modeling piece. I think that's really important to know that you can continue to thrive and operate and perform, but it doesn't mean sacrificing all aspects of you. And if you're somebody who's creative or joyful or confident and all of those things, you're starting to neglect or sacrifice, they're telltale sign that you're going down a road that is probably not going to lead anywhere very good.
Definitely.
I did the same thing back when I burnt out. I completely sacrificed little things that at first may seem really just small in nature or not as important. I love art. I love listening to music. I love the opera, ballet. And of course, my mindset was always at that point when I was working, I'm too busy. So I don't have time for this. I don't have time. And you push everything at the back burner. You don't have time for anything else. But what you don't realize is that day by day, you're a little bit less of the brilliant version of yourself. And actually those things that you don't do, although they may not directly be related to work, they actually help you do your best work because they're part of what makes you you. They're part of what makes you creative or think differently or even your joie de vivre, this state of being, right? That makes you be more charming to be around. I think those are important to talk about as well.
Definitely. And you're right in that it is slow. So you gradually, you sacrifice that one thing and think that's okay. But before you know it, there's lots that you've sacrificed that's really important because you are a person made up of many facets with, and you need lots of things to bring joy to your life or happiness. It's not just one dimensional and you need to tap into those things that really make you the whole of you, not just part of you.
Yes, absolutely. And I was wondering if perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about still the either misconception or confusion around stress and burnout, because very often what happens is I have clients that will come to see me and be intrigued, but say, oh, I don't think I'm burnt out. I'm just stressed out. Could you maybe shed some light around how do we distinguish burnout from stress? And if somebody's listening to us today and thinking, that sounds a bit like me, how would one know that they may be dealing with burnout rather than just a little bit more stress than usual?
No, it's a good question. So I'll come on to the misconceptions, but one of them is around stress actually, is that we think that stress is bad. All stress is bad. So while chronic stress, and that's the difference, I think that's when you reach that burnout point. Chronic stress is detrimental. Short-term manageable stress can actually boost performance and focus. But the key is learning how to manage that stress effectively, so ensuring it doesn't go to overwhelm. So the difference between stress and burnout is when you're experiencing that state of being for a long period of time. And if we see ourselves as batteries, they deplete over time and we need to charge, rest, recuperate. If that's ongoing, where's your rest and recuperation? Where's your time to recharge and to get back the energy that you need to keep going? So I think once there's that tipping point and it feels like you can't remember the time when you weren't in this state, you haven't got an end in sight, as in, okay, I know that this week is going to be a stressful one because I've got this, and this going on. What can I put in place that will make sure in any downtime that I have that I do something that makes me happy? One. And two, okay, it's going to be a week and then I know that I can take some time off or my hours will reduce or whatever it may be. And we've got another misconception as well, is that burnout is a sign of commitment, with people believing that you work long hours, you push yourself to the brink, and that's necessary for success. However, this approach leads to burnout because there's a tipping point, and your well-being and productivity in the long run, it's not a linear, it's not just a line which will just keep going. It ebbs and troughs, and we need to give ourselves that time to sustain that by giving ourselves the rest and self-care as we see it. And I think the last thing I'd say is we forget that link between physical and mental health. We often separate the two, but they're intrinsically linked. So poor physical health will likely affect your mental health and vice versa. So again, we come back to taking a holistic approach to well-being, which considers both of those things equally. And we give as much prominence to our mental health as we do to our physical health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you think we have a tendency to not think about our mental health as much as we do because it's harder to put your finger on it, right? Physical health, you have aches and pain. If you're putting on weight because you haven't gone to the gym or you're eating poorly. You're suffering from insomnia or sleep. So they're all quite tangible, quite visible. Whereas mental health, we know it lives on a continuum, but it's harder to put your finger on it, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that aspect of mental health?
Yeah, it is. It's much harder for people to spot sometimes. And physically, you can see when, as you said, you can tell when something isn't right for you. And I suppose it's really a key is understanding yourself or others understanding you. So you'll just spot slight changes in your behavior or your thinking. And that can be a sign that something, you're not feeling as well as you do previously, or your shift or your focus has changed. So I'd say it's unique to everyone, but it's really difficult. But just understanding what makes me mentally well, and you may need to seek support or research or read things to understand what that is and try different things. Like one size isn't going to fit all. We all have different things that support us, but really understanding yourself and how you're feeling, and other people will around you may notice before you do. So again, coming back to about having those people around you, the people seeking feedback from people that you trust around how you're appearing, how you're being perceived or whatever, can really support you with your mental well-being. And I think it's important when you notice a shift is really not letting it drift, thinking, oh, it will be okay, it will be okay. It's just this one thing. Just really trying to delve underneath and thinking, what support can I put in place for myself to support my mental health and what keeps me mentally well? Because the difference, I think, with mental health is that it can slowly creep up, and then suddenly you're like, wow, I'm really not feeling well. And you're at that point, whatever point it may be, where you desperately need support. And if you can just work rather than dealing with it at crisis point. You can work backwards and understand yourself and what you need to support you. You can take certain preventative measures or just be aware so you can spot the signs before you need to. And that within our organisation, Mental Health UK, we have what's called a wellbeing wrap. It's a tool we use. And when I first start working with people that I line manage, with their consent, they fill in this form, and it just goes through things. What do you need to keep you mentally? It gets people to think, what do you need? What sort of hours do you like to work? There's all sorts of questions that are asked, and it just gives you a sense of how the person themselves views themselves, how they keep themselves mentally well. And we come back in one-to-ones to that tool to address, but it also means that I understand them a bit better. So if I start to see someone I'm managing, sending emails a bit later than normal, or not taking that break that they would normally do at lunchtime, or hasn't had a holiday for a while, or, I know their triggers or their signs, and I can have that open, supportive conversation with them to stop it from getting worse for them, and really act as that kind of checker, I suppose, in a lovely, kind and gentle way, of course. And I think the last thing I'd say is, for me, that self-reflection and self-awareness is really, really important in ourselves, but also in others that we, as senior leaders, so that we understand and we take the time to understand people and how they function, and build that trust will really make a difference, I think.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you've mentioned that, because I think very often without a therapeutic intervention, or without a coach, or without a support or a burnout advisor, somebody that has the tools and strategies and technique to help you strategize how to handle the work, but also how to find your happy place and to be fulfilled with the work, you can actually lose talents. I know both of us have experienced burnout, and we've ended portions of our careers perhaps prematurely due to burnout. And I see this happen every day. And I sincerely believe that if we have more proactive interventions, whether it is through therapy or coaching, we can actually give the support so that the person continue to do what they love and live their happier life without having to quit or go on burnout leave or being sick for prolonged amount of time. So if we think about it in terms of the amount of lost talent, there is a real need for a societal and cultural shift and intervention. What are your thoughts around that?
I definitely think there's a need for a shift, an intervention, and I couldn't agree more with you in terms of I've had a coach for a number of years now, and I really value that time, because sometimes you might not want to speak to your line manager, and that's absolutely fine about everything, but your coach gives you a psychologically safe space where you can share and you can be vulnerable, and you can say, I found that really hard. I found that what I had to do really hard in terms of, I felt like I was out of my comfort zone or out of my depth with this piece of work I had to do. You can really share and then build strategies to help you to succeed. So I couldn't agree more. And I think, the current state of mental well-being, particularly among high-achieving professionals, I think it varies and depends on a number of factors such as workplace culture, individual traits and external stressors. But what I can say is that burnout and mental well-being across various industries, studies have indicated that it's on the rise, especially where, no surprise, demanding high-pressure roles. And I think, for me, one of the key findings which has been really insightful is that there's often a disconnect between how employers perceive mental health initiatives and how employees actually experience them. So many employers think that they're doing enough to support their teams, but employees disagree. So I was reading this study, workplace wellbeing study conducted this year by the University of Oxford. And their study revealed that I think it was around 96% of CEOs felt that they had the support in place for their workforce well-being, but only 69% of employees felt the same. So there's a gap there that we need to bridge. And if we look at it globally, even I think the stats are 1 in 4 employees experience symptoms of burnout. So, we've got some toxic workplaces out there, and we've got there's a definite shift needed, and not to see self-care as a luxury. It's not. It's part of whatever self-care looks like for you, and individually it'll be different. But it's got to be built into our lives and has to play a prominent role.
Mm. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the fact that you found coaching helpful as well, because one thing that I think is sometimes over talked about compared to other aspects are things like, our sleep, fitness. And I don't mean they're over talked about because they're not important. They're crucial and they're fundamentals and they're pillars of burnout prevention. And it will be practically impossible to help someone with burnout if they have poor sleep and poor fitness and poor self-care. So those are really, really important pieces for conversations. But what I'm not seeing enough yet in the industry is the conversation around promoting therapy, advocating for coaching, and for a line manager to say, good, you're seeing a therapist. This is not a conversation I should be privy to. And this is a conversation for you to have with that, say, therapist or coach, but even being comfortable with the fact that our manager knows that we're being coached or we're seeing a therapist would be such amazing progress. Very often I still have clients that say, I'm not comfortable for my boss or line manager or leader to know that I'm seeing you, a coach, right? That there is still an element of, I'm embarrassed to seek professional help and support. And yet the reason I think it's so important to talk about this is if we look at other industries like sports, for example, being coached or having a therapist is really part of your performance package. And you would need to make sure you see a professional to continue to thrive and perform. Yet we're working in professions with huge amount of pressure. And we think that being supported professionally is a sign of weakness.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and it is definitely true. And we all developing and learning, and we need support with that. We haven't always got all the answers for ourselves, and we need the input of others, and having that feedback and that trusted space is really important. Otherwise, how do we grow? I do think it's really important, and I'm happily share with anyone the impacts and the benefits of having a coach. But also I share your sentiment in that we do kind of talk a lot around, be it exercise or diet and things like that might be important for, which I'm not saying they're not, they are. But what can we put in place to really elevate our performance that doesn't sacrifice our mental health? And that's, for me, that's the difference a coach can make to you, because what a coach has done for me is really honed my ability to self-reflect and be aware, and also to put things in perspective, because we're all our own worst critics, aren't we? And but you need someone who is seeing things independently, has a different relationship from you, isn't a friend, isn't a colleague, is there and can see things much more objectively and shine a different light. And sometimes my coach has said things in a way where I'm like, I hadn't thought of it like that. That's a really interesting way of looking at that. And yes, it really has made a difference to some of my approaches, but also the way that I lead, and just someone there that is listening, and their aim is to support you to develop yourself as you want to. Imagine having that available to you. It's a huge benefit to you. And it won't just affect your work life. It will bleed in as it could do, because we're not just at work. We bring some of ourselves to work. It will bleed into your personal and who you are as a person as well. So I definitely think there needs to be a shift where people feel they can talk about having a coach. And secondly, that if they are in therapy and they're seeking that support, that's okay. And that's good. That's not something that you should feel ashamed of or shy for talking about. That means you are looking after yourself and making sure that you get the support that you need. And ultimately that would have an impact, as we spoke about earlier, on your work and your productivity and your performance and your presenteeism and all those things that organizations strive to achieve. So why wouldn't you want someone to be able to bring themselves and what they're experiencing to the workplace?
I have one more question for you, if I may. Have you come across this in our industry whereby some line managers, leaders, or even HR professionals get a little nervous, if not anxious, about talking about burnout for fear of spreading the concept around the organization? So I've often had the objection of, if we do a burnout prevention initiatives, aren't we somewhat already admitting we have a burnout problem? Which is interesting, right? Because we all know the problem already exists. And I don't believe that by talking about it, you make it more existent. You actually potentially can help solve it. But there is a genuine anxiety from certain leaders or owners or C-suite executives to actually not spread the burnout syndrome, so to speak. Can you tell us a little bit about that fear?
Yeah, and I have seen it, not in my current workplace at all, but definitely in past places. I think sometimes it's a case of, if I don't say it, it doesn't exist. So I don't really have to support it, because it takes investment to support people to be mentally well. But it gives you a great competitive strategic advantage as an organization, but it does take investment and commitment. So I think sometimes it's like, if it's not there, if I don't say anything, then it doesn't exist. I think maybe people worry about what they will uncover if they were to talk about it. So it happens over there, but it doesn't happen here. So I suppose for me, where I've really seen it happen is where you've got organizations who aren't really engaged with their employees. They don't necessarily take the time to do surveys, to dig underneath that and find out what our employees' experiences here. And maybe they don't value their employees as much as they should do. And I think also it's, if I uncover this, or I talk about burnout, I have to put something in place meaningful to support people with that. And do I feel comfortable? Have I got the tools to do that? Has my organization got the tools to do that? Will it mean that it actually, people take more time off because they feel they're entitled to now? Because none of this being true really, actually the case. But I think, there's a lot of stigma, isn't there? There's a lot of stigma still around burnout and what it means. And does it mean that I'm weak, or I can't cope, or I shouldn't be in this role because I might experience stress? And to bring it back full circle to what we spoke about earlier, those senior leaders need to, one, talk about it, and two, model and share when they have experiences themselves, and really be open about it. Because I just think workplace culture is so, so important to an organization. And if you are hiding from what is the reality, from what we can see from reports, the prevalence of burnout and stress, then you are stopping your employees from seeking that support that they need. And you are perhaps doing your organization a disservice in terms of that productivity and and so on that could be harnessed and allowing your employees to thrive.
Yeah, I think there is another advantage to having those burnout conversations that may not be so obvious, but let's say there is a burnout prevention workshop at an organization or a burnout prevention initiative. Not everybody in that organization is prone to burnout or burning out, but what if during that intervention, they learn tools and strategy that is actually going to make them even more resilient, even more performant, and learn self-care measures or strategies that they perhaps would not have come across. And in fact, this initiative is now acting at a double level, whereby it's helping those who are already on the path to burnout, but it's also preventing employees that were very far from burning out, but it's making them more resilient and more performant and boosting the overall culture of performance at an organization-wide level. I think that's also an advantage.
Oh, completely agree. And Mental Health UK, my organisation, particularly focus on prevention because prevention is better than cure. And I think if you're kind of tackling that and giving people the tools they need, they may not need them right now, but imagine when they do get stressed, whether they know how to support themselves and make sure that they stay mentally well. That means they're going to perform at a consistent standard because they're able to look after themselves, and they'll be able to spot the signs in others to also support them. So it will have a knock-on effect. So I completely agree. Prevention is, or upskilling people with the tools that they need to spot burnout and stress is key and gives organisations a massive advantage if they invest in that, personally and professionally. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you feel about mental health champions or mental well-being buddies in organization and systems that are put in place to have those check-in and companionship and allyship within organizations?
I think mental health champions are key. I think they're really important within organisations. Because they've been trained. As long as they're given the tools that they need to be able to perform that role, then I think they can be key. The one thing I would say though is people have to know who they are. So within an organisation, because if they're not visible, then you can have champions in place. But if people don't know that they're there and what they can do to support with you, as long as that is also a safe space for people to share with their champions if they wish to get that support. So I think, people need to know that they exist. The champions need to be regularly kind of given that support that they need as well, because there's an impact when you're talking to people about their mental health. So who are they going to get support to make sure they stay mentally well? And I think for me though, I do really value them and I think they're really important, but I think you need to put a range of measures in place. So that would be one of the things that I would have within an organisation to support people's well-being and prevent extreme or chronic stress and burnout. But there are a number of other tools, as we spoke about earlier, organisation at individual level, that if you bring that all together into one, creates a workforce which is fully supporting its employees and encourages them to thrive.
Thank you. Deidre, may I ask you one last question?
You may.
Well, I found this conversation so inspiring, and I'm also greatly inspired by your incredible undertaking as a director of national program. It's a huge role. And I know you've had a burnout episode in the past, and I know you've mentioned certain of your non-negotiable around health and fitness. Is there anything else that you could share with our listeners in terms of how do you maintain that excellent level of work that you do, that professionalism, your performance, your drive, your passion, which is clearly visible, while not burning out again? Can you share something around that for us?
Yes, I can. It's a good question. So I think there are a number of things actually. I think we've spoken about this before, but that's that ability to self-reflect and being self-aware, I think, is really important. Seeking feedback from people that you trust, so peers, mentors, someone independent to yourself is really important. I think a key one for me, Charlène, is working with purpose. So the question I often ask myself is, what and why am I doing what I'm doing? And aligning this purpose to my core values and my passions. So my work deeply reflects what I care about. And then an extension of that is purposeful work. So do I feel connected to the vision and the mission of my organization? Because I want to contribute something meaningful. And interestingly, in my current role, when I applied for this role, one of the questions that I was asked in the job application was around, these are the organizational values. Tell us how your values align with the organizational values. That's the first time I've been asked a question like that. And I was like, wow, I want to work for an organization who wants employees to work for them, whose values align and they're connected. And it just made me quite excited to be part of that. So yeah, definitely working with purpose and aligning values. I think we've spoken before, and I talked previously about having those champions for you in place, role models, that work-life balance. What does that really mean to me? What does work-life balance mean to me? For me, it means keeping myself in check and knowing what's important and non-negotiable. But I'm not always perfect, and I recognize that in myself. So when I feel that the work-life balance is skewed, resetting my boundaries, saying, right, okay, I've noticed that I'm working longer hours. I think as well, because I've experienced burnout, I have people in my life that recognize those triggers or recognize when my behavior is starting to change. And they'll just say, I've got an agreement with my partner now. If any of those signs come to light, just a gentle kind of questioning, you seem to be working a bit later than normal recently, or you seem to be preoccupied. Just those gentle little reminders to bring myself back and to reset the balance. And a really important thing, I think, is setting yourself those goals, because for me, at least, they give you that sense of direction and you can see progress being made. For someone who's quite driven, I like having that sense of achievement, but it's got to be not at all costs, So setting yourself achievable goals and being able to see that progress really helps me to perform and be professionally strong, but also to stay mentally well.
That's really important. I love that you said that, and I can echo that wholeheartedly. Finding this sense of alignment of values and purpose is a very safe, holistic burnout prevention tool to continue to do what you love.
Definitely. Yeah.
Deidre, thank you so much. If someone wanted to connect with you and the work that you do at Mental Health UK, what would be the best way to contact you or the organisation?
So the best way to contact the organisation, we have a website. It's www.mentalhealth-uk.org. We're also on social media channels. So we've got an Instagram account, Facebook and LinkedIn. There are many ways to contact us and seek support or just guidance or just seeing people's lived experiences as you may see fit. So there's many ways to contact us.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to add all the details for Mental Health UK in the show notes. So thank you so much for making this show episode super special today. And I'm really grateful for all your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlène. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your time with me today and listening to this episode. Remember to subscribe so that you can receive weekly updates. And if today's message resonated with you, please remember to share it with a friend, a colleague, or a loved one who could really benefit from this episode.